Olá, welcome to the Innovations for the Future Game World Builder interview. Today is Rob arriving to this space. Thank you, Rob, for accepting my invitation.
Pleasure.
And the space is open for us to talk about way of counsel. Is one of the magics that you put on the space, on the beautiful space that you create. And I met you some years ago, bringing this magic to Portugal, and I thank you for that service that you are, gifted in with. We are gifted for you to choose to do that in Portugal. And my first question is that, can you say more? What is way of counsel? Can you say more about the history, what we are talking about, and this kind of stuff?
I can. Happily. But first I want to say also how supportive you have been on the journey here in Portugal. So I arrived in 2013, I think it was, to give a first training, and it has its own story. Kind of interesting how it all happened. But right from the start, Michael, you've been somewhere in the picture and offering spaces for free talks and just generally giving a lot of support to council, and also following through with something similar that you were already offering. So yeah, getting people together and having interesting or different kind of conversation that's than the more usual way of exchange. I have a particular love of sitting in circle, and today I thought it would be nice to actually create one. So imagine that there'll be people watching this at some point, maybe not all at the same time, but inviting them in already to the circle. So I'm just lighting a candle for all our relations, which means that there's an acknowledgement of a connection to all beings, living and inanimate, that we are all part of one system, one way from the heart. So happy that you've invited this conversation. Thank you. I started my council journey out of a very dark place and came into a beautiful village called Anilio in Greece, on the mainland, and sat in circle for 3 weeks listening to people sharing something real. And it was life-changing for me at that point, because being very depressed, I was not able to relate to others. I was stuck in my own world, and somehow hearing other people's truths, as simple and not necessarily profound in any way, but profound just because they were speaking from the present moment and being honest, brought me a lot of healing. It brought me a connection back to myself and to other people. And I left that place after 3 weeks feeling much, much better and more able to be a person that functioned. 3 weeks wasn't enough. I got back home and thought, no, it's not time. I came back for another 3 weeks at that place and was on staff. The first 3 weeks was at a work camp. And in that 3 weeks, I had the opportunity to hold a couple of sessions. And in that space, received such a feeling of privilege to be able to hold space for simple truth. It couldn't have been more simple in some ways. And it just moved me. It moved me, nowhere near touching my mind or anything, just totally moved me. And I started offering circles in Brighton, where I was more based, to my dancing people and others who were interested. And after a while, I read a book and then had a training. And after several years, it was very clear from a couple of messages that I received to commit to the path of whatever that meant, to deliver counsel, to carry counsel wherever I am and in however it feels to come. And it's almost it's often like being a passenger. I don't feel I'm leading it. It leads me, or it opens gateways or portals and suggests to me to walk through. And in the same way, it speaks through me and other people that sit in the circle. And that's it. I'm part of something much bigger than myself, and love to be in that field where people are sitting and listening for what is greater than us in that moment. And that includes, the environment and all the things that go on in it and come into our circle sound-wise, or even insect-wise, or alarm-wise, or however it comes. Depends where we are, of course. That's my answer, and I don't know if that says something to you in terms of what council is. I could be a bit more detailed, a bit more practical. We sit in a circle, we maybe light a candle, pour water, or ring a bell, or find some way to begin. And in that space of opening, we are marking a special time for us to listen and to share. It's a sharing practice. It comes from indigenous places, of course, roots in its many different forms. And to be at one and at peace in that moment, to be listening for what wants to come, what wants to be birthed, what wants to show itself, reveal itself, to be known, to be seen, just to be heard. So we go through some rounds in many different forms. It depends on what we are called to do in that circle, and find a similar way to close. So if I have this candle, let's see, for example, today, I would just invite us both to offer it something and to blow it out. I wouldn't be using it in certain places, for example, some cultures, for example, a more commercial environment might not be suitable, but basically the opening is simply an invitation into a special time, which is not just a conversation in the usual way we use it. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you for bringing that quality that it's not a normal conversation, and it's calling something else. Can you say more about that? What are we calling? And what is the qualities that this kind of spaces that we meet together in a circle have that really make important for us as human beings to sit this way and to talk with each other in this way?
The environment comes to me. That I'm located in a place, that place is holding me in an obvious way through gravity. I'm here. That place has beings in it, maybe birds, trees, or maybe if I'm in a city, lots of other people and activity. And in that place, in that environment, there is a wish that all those voices have a place. And to have a place for me is one of the things I think I see an awful lot of people having challenges with. What is my place? What am I to do here? Does anybody see me? I feel ignored or misunderstood. Everyone's too fast. How do I live here? How do I survive? Could you help me? Or how could I do this better? Or what can I give myself to? And so to bring people into this arena or area, usually in a circle, where we might see each other and stop for a while and slow down, listen. These questions can arise and be given space to be addressed from the present moment as we see, hear, and feel them. You're asking about the quality of that. Strangely, when I talk about speed, the speed of things, which is in my life seems to be accelerating. In the slowing down, that actually comes to me more information. I receive more awareness of what exactly is happening and how better to respond to it, rather than just react, and then become exhausted. So the slowing down becomes even an activist kind of attitude, but a necessary one, I think, for health and balance. And when I sit with others, and I was speaking about something bigger than us, I'm speaking a little bit about the collective intelligence. I was brought up in a Western education, which was kind of bringing me into thinking in the singular way, that I'm an individual, I must do my best, I must make my way, and it's a lot to do with how good I am at this or this or this, as to whether I make it or I'm successful. Whereas perhaps a more indigenous viewpoint is, what is my part in this whole? Who are my people? And what can I contribute to this group? It's a different way of thinking, and that I only exist because you exist. These kind of things can be found. So what I'm exploring really after 20 or so years is, or what I call it, or what I feel it is a re-indigenizing of myself, or a deschooling from the more Western education that I've had into thinking differently. So I still think, so I speak as an individual, but I think like a circle. I speak as an individual because I have my place at the circle, and that counts. That place in the circle counts. But I think like the circle. So as I'm aware of what I'm contributing, I'm really interested in what everyone else is contributing to this circle. What's the bigger story here? What are we doing here? So the ego is kind of put a little bit in a place here, and the intuition is allowed more space, perhaps, to listen into the organism that I'm part of. And I like sometimes to think in a global scale, that if we were perhaps more educated or practiced in this way in the West, we may understand better how to be in balance with the world, with the environment, and with the peoples and animals and creatures that are part of that system. It's my experience in the microcosm of sitting in a circle that something we call the field arises. It's a feeling of actually being carried or lifted by something, that there's no more work to do. It's just simply that we listen together, and what comes, comes. I think maybe, I mean, there's many ways of framing it, but it could be possibly that just everybody in that circle has become present. And maybe it's not measurable by science at this time, but maybe that creates a field by which something else can happen. My job as a facilitator is to really look to see how that is possible with what people bring and how we are in that moment. And of course, it's not always achieved, but that would be my job as a facilitator, and rather than to try to lead or direct it in a certain way. And sometimes we sit in circles for a particular theme or idea, or wish to explore something, which includes conflict, of course. Did I cover that a bit?
Yes, thank you. You cover that. That is the beauty of the questions and this kind of space. The question lead you to someplace, and it's impossible not to arrive there. You arrive there. It's always that. And it put me it triggered a story in myself. We are a team of 4 in the Foundation Terra Agora, and we all have counsel in common. And we use council regularly as our way of being together and doing the work, whatever that means. And I have so many experience of arriving to the circle with that sense of, I don't know. We have a challenging on the table and I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to solve it. I don't know what's come next. And we start engaging in a conversation and we go in a round and 2 rounds and the fears and the anger and the sadness and the stories and whatever comes. And suddenly something completely different appears in the middle of the conversation. And we have a, sometimes it's not a solution for the problem, but it's a completely reframing of the problem, and it's no more a solution. It's a completely different thing that is on there, and it's impossible to say, I was the guy that have this idea, and you have the guy that has that idea. It really comes from that space that we are holding, the 4 of us, and really going with the thing, the challenge is an authentic challenge that is on the table, and we go with that, and something born from that. And I have this experience so many times that I left the circle with so much energy that the one I arrived in, that we have a completely different approach to a question that was on the table. And this kind of steps really energize me and say, yes, I want to live my life talking with the people in this way, because I'm seeing that the work is being done. It's like people, when usually I talk about the circle and working the circles. Oh no, this is for conversation and for other stuff. That here we need to do the work. And what I'm experiencing in my context is the work is being done, and I'm glad of doing that work. It's not a push thing. It's nobody needs to tell me what to do. I'm with the others, and that comes to my plate. Okay, I do it because I want to do that. I really want to, and that's for me, it's magic. It's being in a context that my voice, it's really heard. It's a part of, but something comes from the beauty of being together. And somebody said that it's an art of thinking together, like being in a council. It's a kind of art of thinking together. And I also enjoy that when you talk about the speed. I had this thing of coming from the light speed that we have in our mind to the heart speed, so something completely different that is tuning the heart. And that is a felt sensation. We felt that our heart is really tuning for something completely different. And thank you for bringing that story to me, to popping up this story in me. And you are working with this thing in Portugal, yeah, in the last 10 years around that. And for sure you have stories of people using council in several contexts, maybe in schools, maybe in organizations, maybe in communities. Can you bring one of these stories and talk a little bit about what you are seeing in Portugal around council? That what is there?
That's an interesting question, because at the moment there seems to be a transitional period. What I can say is that since council has been here, that's as far as I know, of course, the people I'm connected to, the ones that have really taken it forward are the ones who are in education. So they are meeting with groups of people every day, or in every work day, and sometimes being put in situations that are difficult and challenging, and found, council could be a way, and offered it forward. And it's been accepted in certain places. So in some educational facilities, they've taken on council and paying facilitators to use it. And as far as I'm aware, it's successful. And there's a growing demand or interest in it, both as an educational tool into how to deal with things that seem very overly complex, socially and even technically. For example, mentoring. So it's in the early stages, even though it's been here 10 years. So it is a slow kind of growth. And I sometimes liken it to growing a tree or growing a forest. In order to change an ecology or a landscape, yes, we can devastate something overnight, and that changes it overnight. But to actually grow something with nature takes maybe a few generations to really see changes, big changes. So this progress is necessarily slow, or at the speed it will or wants to work. Trying to think of a specific story. It's not only educators, because I know there's 2 or 3 other facilitators just continuing the work, bringing it to women's groups or men's groups, just in whatever way we're called, coming back to myself, I used to sometimes ask what I would call the spirit of council. So what are you asking? What's coming through me here? And that's what I think every facilitator is asking, how can I bring it? And how can I bring it in my way? And that's it. We're living in our usual lives, perhaps. As a trainer, I have a slightly different life than just the facilitator. I'm invited to live council in every moment. Somewhat challenging because when I'm out of the circle, there's no agreements. Yeah, there's no opening or closing of ceremony, and it's very, very testing sometimes in difficult situations to remain in the council way. And I can't say whether I'm good at it or not, but I'm learning how to be in council out of, say, council circles. I have to walk the talk, of course. Yeah. There is it's my view, of course, there is a huge need in the world, I feel, for something to change. And I think most people would agree with that, although perhaps we wouldn't know how or what. My answer is, well, since we don't know how or what, why don't we all get back together in circles and listen? And through the listening or the exercise of the muscle of listening to each other and slowing down, perhaps the answers arise, or as in your story, we reframe the question. I think it was Einstein, we can't solve the problem with the same mind that we had, in approaching or receiving the problem. So, let's get into a different mindset. My particular work or interest, let's say, at this point, is how to bring groups that already exist, different kinds of groups, together. What would be a fascia for them to interface with each other that wasn't called anything in particular, but it's a way for them to come together and integrate a connection that is kind of unified by the idea that, yes, can we do something about this? Can we reorganize ourselves in such a way that we're much more in balance with each other and with the environment and the way we do things? So I say I don't have the answer. I'm really with you with this don't know, and how exciting that is. Rather than stressing, I have to find an answer. It's kind of, okay, so my contribution is, let's get together in circle. Maybe others is, let's move together, embody what it is that we're feeling or not feeling. Can we put together, or can I offer something forward from my gifts? And everybody has gifts in some way or other. Sometimes those gifts aren't recognized as gifts, but they're what we can contribute. And in the right place, right time, all those gifts make a beautiful picture. How to get there, that's my work right now.
Thank you, Rob. I will put a distinction. I feel myself as a council practitioner, meaning that I did the training with you, and I'm being sitting in council, and I know I'm like, I have this will of experimenting council in different contexts of my life, in my relationship with my children, in the projects I I work with friends, it doesn't matter. Like I call that to be a practitioner of counsel. I had the training, I have the experience, and I'm experimenting with myself. You are talking about being a trainer, meaning that you train other people in doing that. I'm not a trainer of counsel. I did that path. And you also talk about being a facilitator for a counsel process. I'm also not a facilitator of counsel in that sense that you are talking about. It could be, okay, we could have this kind of distinctions, meaning that there are, like, to be a trainer, you need to go for a path. You need to have a mentor, you have to do something that really prepares you to train other people in doing that thing. And I'm seeing myself more as a practitioner. And in that context, I could say, I will ask your opinion about that, but I could say that I'm seeing the movement is growing in Portugal, that there is a lot of practitioners in council, and that is growing. I don't know how many did the course with you, but if I have to guess, I've more than 100 for sure in this last 10 years. And I'm seeing that in the several projects that I'm going around the country, someone had been in a course with you, someone has been in a council with someone that did the course with you. That the thing is already happened. It's already there. It has this thing. And we have some projects like Tamara, they use counsel inside in this sense that I'm talking with as a practitioner, like Valdelama, they also use, there is the people in Boom also use, the Fundação and others. I know that others are using that the thing is already on the field. And yes, I have some experience also with men and women circles and several of them. And I could say, like, Rebuild is a gathering for the regenerative movement in Portugal, and they use counsel as the way of doing the stuff. And yeah, like, for me, with my eyes and my perception, it's that the movement is there. It's not like that kind of movement that goes to the TV and the newspaper, but it's really a movement that do the work of the mycelial work that is underground, that is connecting people, and I'm noticing that. I'm noticing that is happening. And I'd like to listen from you. What is your perspective about this? My perception. Because you have more information and you are more connected with the people that did the training with you and that are in the projects, and also have this. I'd like you to explore, Rob, that question that you said, that point that you said, that we are in a particular time in our collective life that we have this kind of challenge, and maybe the circle could be and coming together and using counsel to start talking about that could be a very interesting experience. I'd like you to like go with these two things. From one side, what is seeing in the mycelium around using counsel in Portugal, and the other side, how do you see that these two things are together or are coming together or whatever? This need to coming and have meaningful conversation with others because of what we are living.
First of all, I would like to say something about way of counsel and counsel. So counsel is a generic word for where people come together. They usually sit in a circle, but not always, and listen to what is being expressed in the present and the spaces in between. And anyone could do counsel, and most, it's a very overused word, but in my experience, a lot of people are naturally using counsel. It's a natural human thing to do. No one needs to give you any training. It's obvious. You sit and you listen and you have some kind of agreement, spoken or unspoken, in that moment. So you were doing counsel, and you're free to do counsel, and everyone's free to do counsel, and wonderful. And that's what I feel would benefit or benefits the world. And, you know, I guess indigenous nations and developed their own. So no one's giving them training. It was just, it just originated. And part of the story is that Axis Mundi, the center of the village, where tribes moving around, they're taking the staff, which has a lot of meaning and power, and placing it somewhere where the village will be for a temporary time. And that's the center of the village. And that also represents the talking piece. So when we sit around the circle, when we sit in the circle around the center, and we take the talking piece from the center, we're speaking as the center of the village. We're speaking as a present moment, and each of us is a leader in that way, whether a 5-year-old child or a 50 or 500-year-old ancestor speaking from somewhere else. I'm coming from an experience of a particular path called Way of Council. And it's just a line of people that have made agreements along the way about how to do things and how to pass it on. And I particularly enjoy the fact that it's not registered, trademarked, or you get a rubber stamp. It's a relationship that you develop with people on the path, and we make agreements and we hand it on. And so I would say you are a facilitator of council. For sure, you're facilitating council. It's just a technical thing. If you were saying a facilitator of Way of Council, then there are some agreements to make with those others that are saying I'm a facilitator of Way of Council. So just to say that. And whenever anyone has a training, it's really given, you know, take what you can from it, go out and do it your way, do what comes from your heart. And that's why I was able to even be part of this. Because in my early part of my life, I was terribly resistant to joining any organization because the ones I had been in were all very hierarchic, and somehow or other, I didn't feel good. I didn't trust it, let's say. And when I arrived in the first gathering of my first time gathering of the European Council Network, and there was a big decision to make, which wasn't made that night, but what came out through the conversations around it gave me a lot of trust and respect. Oh, I'm really with people who listen to each other and who want to find a way and not rush and do it in this kind of new way, new for me, of council. And I committed from that moment on to being really part of that network. It's a network, it's not really an organization. It's a network of people who facilitate, train, or carry council. Now, just lastly on this point, anyone who brings a council is a carrier. We say a carrier of council, and to be honest, that's more important than being a trainer or facilitator, just to carry it in the world. I can sit with you, I can listen with you, and let's do that every now and then when we need to, or when we want to celebrate something. The mycelium example I've heard that a few times, and from the elders as well. It's a very, very low key, because it's slow, and it's not bam, sow, pow, you're going to get, it's going to change your life kind of thing. It's the latest technology because it's been around so long. When I try to tell people how great council is, they just look at me and like, yeah, but why would I do that? Because they're already doing it. It's so woven into the fabric of life, how we communicate and talk to each other. But there is a difference, and it's not quite obvious until we sit and do it. So I learned early on to speak about the themes that a council might bring rather than about the council itself. So we use council as a kind of very low-key form of facilitating that hopefully brings people into their hearts, makes them feel secure enough to be able to go there and to trust the other people in the circle in the moment to share something also from there. And that's what connects us. Yeah. Just one last thing about this time. I mean, we're clearly in a global moment of connection. So if we're not doing it through dreaming or ceremony, we're doing it through the internet and our electronic devices. We're connected. I can connect with anyone around the world who I want to, or is available through these devices. The thing about the devices are that it's actually a third party. And in former times, there was no need for a kind of intervening third party. We'd do it through ceremony or through the possibility of using our own faculties, which we would learn through shamanism or esoteric techniques like this. So we're in this global thing at the moment, and I think a lot of people would agree that it's not going so well, is it? So a lot of people upset and unhappy, and a lot of diversity of opinions and levels of being able to operate in the world that aren't so healthy. So in my lifetime, I've seen great technology come, but I'm not necessarily seeing any change in the shift, away from poverty and away from this pinnacle of, I don't really have the words. I'm going to be honest, they're not coming. So I'll pause with that one. But it's a time, I think, that pulls upon me and many others to offer what we can. We're not trying to save the world or say something like this, but just, I've been gifted this life. It's a precious thing. I'm very, very grateful for this opportunity to be alive here and to enjoy certain parts of it. And I'm invited to bring my dreams and my gifts forward. And that's the space that I want to work and continue to be with. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, thank you. I think we imagine that I'm someone listening to this conversation between us two, and I'm maybe planning to do an eco village, maybe a retreat center, or like Tenshi, or maybe building a team for recovering or restoring a place with forest and things like that. What can we tell to that person or invite her to consider counsel as a way of counsel, and counsel as a way of perceiving and sense and make sense of the team, the project by themselves, that cellular team, and also the world that game world is involved, that project is involved, that around the surrounding, the community that project belongs to. For sure, is in a place. What can we say? What is the stories? What is the qualities that we can put on the table for inviting these persons that are the persons that make the innovations for the future, eager to experiment counsel and consider way of counsel a way of bringing this sense making for their projects and way of doing the work, instead of thinking about other approach that are not considering the circle. Like, we can talk about the hierarchies, but there is other ways of doing that.
I mean, something that happened in this interview was I was speaking and you came with a story. And in that story, it connected you to various things that made sense to you or had meaning. In the ancient times, I would come in from the bush or whatever, and I'd come with a story, and I wouldn't know it was a story. It was just what happened. But in that time, storytelling was perhaps more understood as important, because it conveyed it was the way of conveying information, and that's remained right through until the present day. Stories have a massive part of our lives, contain a massive part of our lives. The sharing of stories, for me, is easier to connect with than necessarily theories or philosophical outflow. in terms of trying to work on something or gather people together. Great ideas, of course, have instilled people with something in their heart that they want to passionately offer forward. It can be an individual that has a great idea, or it can come from a group of people. I wouldn't say there's a rule to it. Actually, that's quite a wide conversation there. There's a lot more things to go off in that direction, but to try to stay on track with your question, if I want to, well, I was part of projects, of course, in the past many times and present, and if I am listening for, how do I make this happen? Is there anyone else around here that sees that? And this is where I'm working right now. So, for example, I'm on a land right now where I have seen, kind of envisioned, a medicine wheel. So I sat in council with some of the others here, and I said this, and at least one other person said, "Oh, I also see that." And they hadn't thought of it where I had thought of it or seen it, but when I said where it was, they said, "Yes, I see it." So for me, there's like a crosshair there of saying something, oh, that maybe wants to happen then. It's not just something coming through me as an idea. So I'm with a group or another person that kind of somehow or other reinforces or confirms that there's something there wants to happen. And everybody else in the circle is hearing this and getting the idea that maybe they'd like to contribute or cooperate with it to happen in some way. Obviously, if I'm struggling with an idea on my own, I'm much better off if I'm supported by a group of people who are also interested in the same thing. Now, where it might get problematic is where people have very strong ideas and they see another idea from someone else as a possibility, a threat to theirs, or not the way they think. So there's a lot of conversation around that, how that might be worked with. But to say in general, if we develop trust amongst ourselves, if that's a prime objective of having council, which of course it is, then I can trust that maybe I don't have the whole picture, that I don't have to have my whole way, because I kind of respect you also, and I trust that also your vision has some, so I don't have to fight for having it exactly my way. I can, I mean, we're more like friends. It's a tricky area to talk about in such a short time, but the deepening of trust for me can come from sharing our personal stories, stories that we have hard lived, or intimate, or sensitive, or funny, that bring a light to others to see us more clearly. I can see this person isn't just the one-dimensional idea I have of him. He's very fixed. He doesn't la la la. I start to see other parts of him, and I start to recognize myself, perhaps, in him in some way. So there's a lot of work to do in the West here with the circle, because we weren't born into it. So even though we might remember it at a cellular level, we have to do a certain amount of practice before we can reach levels of trusting each other, especially around decision making and co-creating. And it can be more or less like this, different speeds, depending on the constellations of people, depending on the way it's held. But the thing to remember, I think, for me, is that this is an emergent process, or an emergent education. We come together with the idea that we're going to create a project or a forest or a class or a school or something like this, and we're not fixed on an outcome in that session. So we call people together, how are we going to do this? And we share stories, and we listen to what's in those stories that can give us pointers or ideas about how we might do it. But a lot of other things are happening at the same time. I'm feeling connected. I'm feeling I can trust you more. I'm feeling like, with the many of us, we're much stronger than the parts. The whole is greater than the parts. it's possible. Someone knows somebody else who can find the bricks. Someone else knows who's an architect. Things can happen. Someone has a love of dealing with money, others with figures and numbers, or writing applications, which others would find absolutely impossible to do. So a gathering of people in good cooperation can actually speed the evolution of something coming into the world, and do it in a way that's not careless. Again, I don't know if that answers your question. It's just what comes to me. There's so many benefits on so many levels. One thing that people do sort of say, well, no, I don't want to do that, because if we come out of our pyramid structure to go into the more horizontal way, it takes so much time. My observation for many years, especially in working in work camps, was that even though it was irritating to engineers and people who were much more focused on how to do it, knew how to do it and what was needed, which unfortunately would sometimes leave people behind who'd come there to experience something or try to learn something, that they would kind of put in a position. Going into this mode was frustrating for some at the beginning, but at the end understood that our heart or our connection was much, much greater. Our communication was far better and easier. And actually the amount of work that got done was either the same or more than would have been done in the same amount of time. But the thing is, it would have been done in such a way as that everybody got a good place in it, or as many as more before. We've kind of honored the thing in a way. So it has more meaning. It has more meaning for those people who contributed to it, rather than just an execution of a task.
Thank you, Rob. And the conversation is going to an end. It's amazing how the conversation flows in this Kairos Chronos sync. I'd like to talk a little bit more about you. You already talk about how do you arrive in council, and I'd like to know how you maintain, how you support yourself for doing this work, for being a training, for being a facilitator. What are the practice, what you do to have integrity and continue to do this work and grow as a human being?
I sit in circles where I'm not the one facilitating. It's a joy to sit in a circle with a good facilitator and feel, I can rest. And it's edgy. I've sat in circles facilitating with other facilitators, and it's tense because they're all thinking, I wouldn't do that. Oh, why is he doing this? It's there in the field, and of course I've done it. I found myself doing a little bit, but actually it's wonderful. So in the last years I'm not doing that, because what I'm understanding as a trainer is that my job is just to be present. That's all I have to do. And if I come out with, I'm not present, and I'm not contributing to their benefit or the benefit of the circle. So what I'm looking for is, how can I support them? Am I ready, willing, and able to support them if called? And I may not be called, and that's great. So that's a shift I had some years ago. Life continues to challenge me, of course, and invite me to use my skills, and I'm a human being, just like anybody else. I'm no super person just because I'm a trainer. It's one of the things I enjoyed actually about council, because it just allows me to be myself. I'm not trying to be something I'm not, or it doesn't invite me to an identity, let's say, that I'm trying to be something that I'm not, like perfect or something. Because the idea of facilitating a council is that the facilitator is in no no way any more important than anybody else. It's just simply that they have that role at that time. As a trainer, when I give trainings, it's somewhat frustrating because in a training, when we go into counsel using real counsel, and it wants to go longer, and as a facilitator, I would allow it to go longer, but as a trainer, I'm trying to bring different things. That's a difficult edge for me. When real things start happening, and I'm there as a trainer, so I kind of work on, well, what's really going to be more benefit here? We shift out into another form because we only have so much time, or do I allow that to go where it wants to go? That's tricky. But I do have elders in my life, and that's the thing I would end on right now. When I was a boy, the idea of an elder kind of existed, but wasn't very found or seen. So that was the kind of grandfather or grandmother figure. And thank God for those of us who had that experience of a grandmother or grandfather figure, someone who'd lived a much longer life and could just say something simple. Well, you know, if you try doing it like this, you might find your life easier instead of spending years trying to figure it out. And they're not invested in the same way as a parent, so you get a slightly more less positional view from the grandparents, let's say, in some ways. So elders really came into my life when I found counsel. Well, about 10 years in, I met elders of the practice and people who'd lived longer than me or as long, and who'd spent a lot of time in circles. And the people they'd met were kind of here, you know, so they tell stories of people that I found that I had previously thought was heroes and I would never connect with, but somehow or other these people had met them, been with them, and sat in circle with them, and yeah, I felt okay. So they're not up there. I'm just on this earth with simple people doing their thing, you know, and that's what I want to encourage everyone to. We're just here, simple, together here. We're all in this together, woven into this fabric. No one's more important than anybody else. Everyone's got roles, but unfortunately, the way the social structure works, it's not that clear. So thank goodness for elders, and when I'm in the presence of elders, I get medicine as well, from animals, from elders, from life, and from putting myself in positions or situations that that force me, or that I've deliberately walked out of my comfort zone to experience. Take risks. Yeah.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you for going with me in this conversation, accepting the invitation for have a conversation about way of counsel and counseling. It's time to turn off the candle.
That's it. So, yeah. So thank you, Marco, for this this hour, for the questions, for the conversation, and for the experience of being in a council field. Blessing this fire with gratitude and sending it on its way. Just to say, I will use my breath, but in some cultures we wouldn't do that. We would use our fingers. But I've got this thing about smoke, and I'd like to see it. So, ready?
Ready. Beautiful. Thank you.